if AI has the potential to replace human beings in so many jobs and so many tasks, what are people going to start training for?
Hello and welcome to CU Live. I'm Susan Post, Associate Editor of Columbus Underground, and I have with me David Staley, Associate Professor of History at OSU, futurist and contributor on CU. So today, being a futurist, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of education and employment and how those are connected and tie into each other. So first of all, kind of with the ever-increasing price of college and the student loan debt crisis, you're kind of seeing a lot more talk about different avenues of education or different career paths. And I think something that Columbus has seen a lot of in particular are code schools or coding boot camps, which are just kind of accelerated programs that prepare individuals for careers in tech. So do you think we will continue to see these sorts of programs gain popularity?
I do, yes. As long as they're able to fulfill their marketing, which is that at the end of the coding boot camp, there's a job waiting for you.
A lot of it promise.
And that's the real strength, frankly, of the coding boot camps. Without mentioning names, if I'm a small college someplace, I'm actually quite worried about that model.
Yeah. So you would say that it is turning out individuals that are prepared for employment, because I know that that's kind of been some discussion, like what sort of roles can they immediately fall into after these sorts of programs?
I've recently learned that there's actually kind of a vetting process to get into these coding boot camps. My assumption was, you pay your $15,000 and you're in, but they're actually much more selective. And again, that's something that makes me think of smaller institutions of higher education. That really is, I think, challenging their model.
Right, because they don't, you don't have to do a lot of the general education kind of stuff, and it's much more tailored and much more focused. And I know a lot of them try to attract like adults or people that are changing careers and things like that as well.
The question for me as a futurist is, what other kinds of subjects will be boot camped like that outside of coding?
Yeah.
What else will they start to move into?
Anything you think that might get the boot camp treatment like that?
It could be all sorts of things. It could be being like an HR professional. In other words, it doesn't have anything to do with technology. It could be sort of preparation for a career, but sort of hyper-focused into what, a 14, 15-week training session.
Yeah, accelerated. So kind of likely tied to this focus on tech careers is artificial intelligence, which is something that you have written a lot about. And I know this is probably going to be a really broad question that's got a lot of layers to it, but how is AI going to continue to impact education and employment opportunities?
So in the short term, it will be people that know something about AI that can code, that are technologists that can work in this area. But I emphasize the short term because the other thing that we're seeing is that AI is learning to write code. So the medium to longer term question is, if AI has the potential to replace human beings in so many jobs and so many tasks, what are people going to start training for?
Yeah.
And my own sort of sense is that it will be the sorts of things that computers and AI aren't capable of doing. Things that we think of as sort of uniquely human skills. Imagination, creativity, those sorts of things that we tend to think of as either soft skills or the sorts of things that art majors do, I actually think are going to become more important.
Okay. And I think when autonomy kind of changed the job landscape, there are people that people can learn how to fix the, autonomous assembly line. Will there be any kind of opportunities for a shift like that with AI, or is it kind of a little more, you need some of those more advanced technical degrees?
I think to be able to service AI, that will require a certain level of technical ability. And that means some sort of advanced training, whether that's in a traditional university or the coding boot camps that we're talking about. And I think we'll probably always, I'm always careful when I say always, but I think we're always going to need people that are going to maintain the system like that.
And outside of tech, I think we're seeing a little bit of a return to a focus on trade skills, electricians, plumbers, things like that. Why do you think we're seeing this shift?
Some of it, I think, has to do with the reaction or the arguments against four-year colleges and universities, especially because of the debt crisis.
Right.
I think that these jobs are seen as future-proof in some ways, difficult to automate. Although I think that some of these jobs can be automated as well. I used to argue, or I used to say to audiences that bricklayers, there won't be a robotic bricklayer. So I was having lunch with an executive at a local construction firm. And he looks at me, he's kind of shaking his head, and he says, "Dave, look at this YouTube video of a robotic bricklayer."
Yeah.
And so now I'm a little more cautious when I talk about the trades. My assumption is that, and this has historically been the case, if technology can be as good or better than a human and cheaper, technology will always replace human labor. And I think that might even be true of the trades.
Yeah. Any other kind of big trends or things that we should be looking out for in the future of education and employment?
If the trends toward automation prove to be the case, if more and more jobs are going to be given over to machines, as a society, we need to think about the dislocation that that's going to represent. So if people aren't engaged in employment, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And this could either be really sort of like horrific and problematic,
Yeah.
Or it represents a real shift in the nature of work and leisure, on the order of shifting from pre-industrial to industrial civilization.
So we'll have to stay tuned and find out.
Stay tuned.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today and
Susan.
chatting a little bit about the future of work.